Go.
Hello. Welcome to Fempreneur True Confessions podcast.
Welcome, everyone. I'm Laura, or Oda. As you know, I'm owner of a virtual assistant project management agency that is here to help women in business really start to build that team behind the scenes so they can start to grow in their business. And that is what we do here at Oda.
Awesome. And I'm Angelique with Lady Powerhouse Solutions, and we do project and event management for women on fire who are out there lighting up the world with their passion and drive, and we help them achieve their mission in the most authentic way possible. Laura and I do pretty similar things, but we've kind of teamed up and become power partners. And it's been a really beneficial relationship. We're business besties, and even if we weren't working together on so many things, we'd still be like talking almost every day, right?
Probably.
We didn't really talk this weekend because I know Laura needed some space and to heal, do some healing and processing. And sorry if I outed you on anything.
We can tell them what happened. I think everybody knows that I'm such a big animal lover and I've been in rescue forever. So we have kind of been, I guess to put it, not lack of better words, emptying out the house as animals have passed away. We've not been adding in. Well, we this weekend had to put down our oldest pup that we've had. He was 16 and we've had him for 13 years now. So it was a lot. And, kind of just going through that. It was the first time my son was present. And so there was a lot to process through as a family. So it isn't quiet, our house. We won't hear as much click-clacking in the background anymore.
Or on the podcast.
So, but yeah, those kinds of things come up, and it's, it's a new beginning, and, we've always been who we are. So it will work out. It's a relief, and he gave his all. So,
yeah. So raise a glass for TT.
Yes. My TT.
We gotta have our coffee, man. Yeah.
So thank you.
Yeah.
And just appreciate, that's stuff happens.
And Laura, your love, because we all know grief isn't linear. It doesn't just last a few days and then it's gone. It comes back to affect us for years to come, right? And sometimes our entire lifetime. I remember when my mom passed, one of the first things that a woman high up in leadership in the hospital I was in said to me, "Oh my God, I lost my mom a few years ago." She goes, "You never get over it." And that is just not what I needed to hear at that point, because I was devastated. Like, I was pretty much an only child. Mom was my best friend. And while mom had been on dialysis for a while, and everybody was telling me, it's getting close, it's almost time. She was telling me no. I was in denial, So it was just not what I wanted to hear. But at the same time, I do reflect on that and go, I see what she means. Yeah. It's not a bad thing. Of course not, and what's that saying? Like, the deeper you love, the deeper you mourn. Like, the longer you mourn, that, and the kind of love you had is the kind of way you'll mourn. Yeah. And so, I'm going to stop because I'm starting to get a little emotional. But anyway, Laura and I have become close in our businesses and as friends, and we do really similar things, and we've come to learn and really leverage the fact that we collaborate instead of competing with each other. And we're finding more and more women are doing this, and fewer and fewer. And maybe that's because we're attracting those kinds of people, those kinds of souls. Yeah. But, it's really encouraging to see women not out there stabbing each other's backs. But again, we're not in corporate anymore.
Right. A totally different world now.
Small business tends to be a little bit tighter community, intimate community. Yeah. So, and we just absolutely love doing the podcast and talking to all these fabulous women. And today is no exception.
Not at all. So I'm going to introduce Lizette, and I am not going to attempt her last name. I will let her do that. But she joins us on the podcast as an innovative and progressive thought leader in occupational therapy and dementia care. With over 30 years of professional experience, Lizette has specialized in incorporating evidence-based practices aimed at reducing burnout and turnover among caregivers in their practice. As the founder and CEO of Think Different Dementia LLC, she has successfully provided coaching and consulting services that empower caregivers to manage stress and enhance their well-being. Leveraging her out-of-the-box thinking, Lizette has identified the use of assessments like the KOLBE Index to align family caregiver strengths with their dementia caregiving roles, leading to improved caregiver well-being and reduced burnout. Welcome, Lizette. So glad to have you here.
Thank you for having me. I'm sorry about your fur baby. I know that is a very tough decision to make for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
And Angelique, I'm sorry about your mom, because partly, number one, because it was your mom, but partly because you were a family caregiver. And even though what I mostly work with are dementia caregivers, the journey is very similar.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And, my mom passed back in 2006, but it feels like it doesn't feel like that. That's been 18 years. It doesn't feel that long.
Yeah.
But thank
She
you.
must have been young.
She was in her 70s. We'll get into that story someday, but I was a mistake. My mom had her tubes tied.
That is so funny. How many years between the oldest sibling and you?
15. Oh, the oldest?
Mm-hmm.
8. 21 years between me and the oldest.
That's
15 between me and the youngest, and 18 between me and the middle son.
Yeah.
And I was the only girl.
That is so funny. My husband's 21 years and his closest was 10.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. But
baby too.
yeah. But I actually just lost my middle brother this year, and they were born 3 years apart, almost to the day, in March, and they died almost 3 years apart to the day.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. It was kind of cool, because it was like, they couldn't be apart from each other that long or something. It was sad. I feel, a lot of sympathy for my niece, nephew, and my sister-in-law, but
sure.
and my oldest sibling, he and I are the last two left, but and yeah, 21 years apart, he and I.
It's fascinating.
Yeah. Yeah. But first of all, thank you for being with us today, and being our guest. And we're really looking forward to talking about the entrepreneurial journey and expansive thinking as an entrepreneur. And so let's talk a little bit about your origin story, because that seems to be a recurring theme with our guests. Is a lot of these women, these entrepreneurs, are coming from corporate. They didn't start out as entrepreneurs. It's almost like Laura and I, we got sick of it.
Mm-hmm.
We got sick of it. And we're like, we're out of here. And we thought, oh, it's going to be not necessarily easy to be an entrepreneur, but the transition wasn't going to be any problem. It's going to be great.
Right.
And that isn't always the case. Like for me, I know I was like, it took me months to be like, get over the PTSD of waking up and having the first thing I'm thinking about is worrying about something for work.
Right. Yeah, for sure. I absolutely understand that. And for me, it's hard because I come out of a healthcare background. So in the healthcare space, you don't think of yourself as corporate. Like
this is true.
From a healthcare perspective, like
right.
You work in the healthcare segment of the economy, the greater economy. And a healthcare provider wouldn't necessarily call themselves a corporate employee. I mean, technically you are, but it's not the same type of corporate structure. My husband and I immigrated from South Africa in 1993, 3 weeks after we got married. I do not recommend that. 31 years later, in September, we're still married to one another, and we haven't killed one another yet. But we emigrated because I received, as an occupational therapist in the early 1990s, the United States was very, very, very actively recruiting any English-speaking physical therapists, occupational therapists, speech therapists, because there was a significant lack of skilled labor in this country. So I was recruited at countries like Australia, New Zealand, the UK, Canada, South Africa, the Philippines, English-speaking professional countries with human beings that could fill the gap. So we immigrated here in 1993, and that started me down the journey of being a healthcare provider. And as a young new grad, your life is you're just figuring out, firstly, how not to kill somebody when you're working with them. And then, you're in a new country, you're newly married, you're just learning all this stuff. And for the first 5 years, my husband and I were actually traveling. I was a traveling therapist. So we saw it as an opportunity to see the United States. We lived in 11 different states in the span of 5 years. Then we were contending with visas and green cards and all this other drama. And my husband wasn't able to work, so we decided to have kids because somebody's got to stay home anyway, so life, right? You get into the cycle of life, and then you start to become more aware maybe of things going on around you, and the frustrations of being in this very proscriptive thing that tells you all the time who and what you're supposed to be, and all of the stuff that comes with it, the job, you have to be there at 8 and you have to work until 4:30, or you've got to give up your weekend. And as I was going through this particular journey, this is the second time I tried to become an entrepreneur. The first one was about 1999-ish. So not super long into from 93 to 99. The bigger difference at that time was that I really didn't know who I wanted to be when I grew up, and trying to figure out what I wanted to do. So I learned some stuff and I tried some stuff, but we were a single income family and 2 little kids at home and a husband who wasn't allowed to work yet, and all of this stuff going on. So I did it about a year, and it really, really was super scary. Like at that time, it was super scary. And moving back into the healthcare space, I could make really good money, decent money. We could have a good standard of living, and so you do the stuff, you live your life, you raise your kids, you make the decisions you make, sometimes in the moment, as opposed to thinking
the bigger
picture. Exactly. Thinking about who do I really want to be when I grow up. And then through all the years, and I'm very grateful for those years because they've really made me who I am today. And it's given me a different perspective on healthcare and on dementia caregiving and on just, everything that I do now. It's kind of like the Lord has gifted me with a brain that sees connections between things. And so I needed all of the variety that I had to be able to pull out, and make something new. And then I started my company. It's called Think Different Dementia because I want people to think different about dementia, in 2020, right before the whole COVID stuff, all of that, out of sheer desperation for working 60 hours a week. So I was trading my 60-hour work week for an 80-hour work week. I just didn't know.
Right.
But I started at that time, and I started working on, oh, well, do I want to do this? Well, then I'm like, no, that's really not what I want to do. But the whole time thinking, I want to have a business. I want to take care of, I'm tired of being a widget maker in the therapy world. I'm tired of doing all of that. So it was a long journey from the time of starting the business to actually, like, I had to work my way out of a job.
Oh yeah, you have to have an exit plan, especially when you're the main breadwinner.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, from starting the business to actually being able to work my way out of the job took almost 3 years.
But that's good though. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
slow and steady wins the race, right?
And that's exactly, my thinking. And then we started to make, when you're young and stupid, you make stupid decisions. When but sometimes when you start to look a little further out, some of the decisions would probably give half of the people listening to this gray hair, maybe not because they're entrepreneurs, but like if I tell my colleagues, my ex-colleagues, like how much money I have put into my own personal development and growth in order to start a business that hasn't made me a lot of money yet,
Mm-hmm.
they would tell me, you've lost your mind. Like,
Yeah.
you have lost your ever-loving mind. But at the same time, without me investing that money in myself, I know that I would still be working for someone.
Yes. You know, there's
Powerful.
I worked in an executive coaching firm supporting executive coaches for a while, and loved that experience and everything I learned there, including being group coached and seeing the value in coaching. Because before then, I didn't understand it,
Mhm.
not at all. So when a coach came to me and said, I can help you, I was receptive instead of like, yeah, whatever, I'm not paying you that much money, But when you compare the amount of money you pay in coaching, okay, to a college education, that
Oh, for
takes you
sure.
a minimum of 2 to 4 years, depending on what kind of education you want,
Mm-hmm.
to coaching. It's not necessarily less expensive. In most cases it is, but it's faster.
Mhm.
You condense and speed up that continuum, that journey, and there's so much more value in time.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Especially with a lot of the entrepreneurs coming in, we've gone through those life experiences and work and job and learning to deal with conflict. We've already kind of been through all of that. So the idea of like taking that back to school to learn certain things or go through certain things we already have life experience in is really difficult for a lot of people. I know, at least in my generation or my age, that's a hard thing. So it's not it's not that they don't want the education, but they really want it to be honed in on what is going to be
Mhm.
the best for them instead
They
of all
want
the
the result.
outside of
Right.
that. Yeah. And it's definitely, I feel the same way. I started my business and I thought, okay, well, this will go and this is how it'll be. Life changed quick. I had to jump into it in a much quicker scenario, traumatized, and then realized that I was getting ready to have to start backtracking because I had a journey I had to fix. I had done this in a way that wasn't the best. I didn't do the exit strategy or anything else. So it was really then learning from there. And it's been that journey for the last 3.5, 4 years of just trying to really cinch up what is happening and what really happened in that journey and what I was doing. But had I thought about, well, you go to school and you do the coaching, I wouldn't have been open to all of that either.
Right.
Coaching is definitely it hit where it was like, open your eyes. This is a
Uh-huh.
whole other level of education you didn't know.
And I love learning. In fact, as a kid, I loved summer school. I didn't need it, but I wanted to go. I would play school, and teach myself things. Like, I was a teacher and a student. Like, I was an only child. Come on. I loved school. So I loved college. And this is the one of the first times up until recently that I've gone an extended period without being in a formal education or coaching program, like the past couple of years. I had a car accident a couple of years ago that completely derailed my life plan, and so I didn't really actively pursue education, coaching, and that kind of thing for that period up until recently. And now I'm in several group coaching programs, and I love that whole community and that mindset. So once you said you spent 3 years kind of doing your exit plan, and then once you were out, it was great. It was smooth sailing, right?
Oh gosh, no, I wish. And that was really the interesting part for me. Because I'd been preparing myself for a long time, but I literally had to sit, and I wish I had thought to pull it out, but I had to sit down and I had to write down my mindset as an employee and the mindset of an entrepreneur and work towards changing my mindset, because it is not the same thing. You cannot think the same way when you are an entrepreneur as what you think about when you're an employee. They are vastly different. They are night and day different.
And I don't know about you, but one of the biggest mistakes I see is people that go from that into that, and they want to work like an employee, and you can't.
No, you can't. You cannot. And now part of mine was almost a knee-jerk response to almost the exact opposite. And now yesterday, August the 4th, would have been a year since I stopped working full time. And
congratulations.
Like a full year that I have not received a paycheck, like from someone else.
Right.
Right. And just learning how, that's one of the biggest differences, right? And this is if you are listening or watching today and you are an employee somewhere and you feel like you're safe because you're getting a paycheck every 2 weeks, I want to encourage you to rethink that, because even though, like, I have to tell myself every single day, like, my runway, we strategically, I still have a 10-month runway if I need it. We don't want to access that if we don't need it. And my company is generating an income, but now it's me. Like, I'm generating this money, not a company paying me for something that I did 6 months ago, right? And I had to go in my head and say, Lizette, you believed incorrectly that you had a runway, a limitless runway in front of you when you were an employee, because it consistently came in every 2 weeks.
Right.
That was a fallacy.
You have no runway, because they can drop you at any moment.
No runway. You have
unless you've built it in yourself.
Correct. Absolutely. Yes, you can, have savings and things like that. But the reality of the matter is, until you work for yourself, until you're an entrepreneur, until you are generating money, creating value for someone that they're willing to exchange money for, that's when you get security. That's when you first actually get security. And that might, so when I stopped working, my knee-jerk response was, like, I wanted no structure. Like, I want to do what I want when I want. It's kind of like when I pulled my kids out of school and we unschooled for a year. We didn't homeschool, we just unschooled. We pulled them out and said, do your math homework, and for the rest, I don't care what you do, just don't kill one another. So that was like the knee-jerk response. And what's been interesting now, a year later, like, I've started to build in structure, but I don't work like 8 to 5 type of thing. But at the same time, almost went too far the other extreme in letting business take over and expand into all of the spaces because I didn't put up good boundaries, because I don't want to set an alarm clock in the morning. I'm tired of setting an alarm clock. So I just wake up when I wake up.
Mhm.
I mean, we go to bed every day at the same day, and I typically wake up within a half hour span, 6 to 6:15 in the morning. So it's not like I'm getting up, 10 o'clock in the morning type of thing and not having had a whole day. But then some of my morning routines have just started to expand out, and just, so now it's like, okay. And you were mentioning that you're a lifelong learner. Well, I'm a lifelong learner too. And so as an entrepreneur, I started to listen to different podcasts, different things, come into different viewpoints that I never had as an employee, as a healthcare employee. It wasn't stuff that I would be listening to. And so now I'm like, okay, now I've got to figure out the structure that works for me as an entrepreneur, that is not an employee, but that's not this whole
Right.
free for all thing that's eating up my whole life, because then I've just traded one slavery for another one, and now I'm
Yes.
the slave owner instead of
Uh-huh.
slave. Now I'm both.
Self-imposed.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. That's
Yeah.
different. It was real difficult. There are still moments where I slip into the employee mindset, or when something's struggling and I'm like, oh God, let's go back to every 2 weeks. And you get sucked into that, mental, oh no, what's happening. And quickly coming out, I've learned to quickly come out of that. But there are those moments where we do go back to, oh yeah, this probably was much more easier than I remember it now, at least, like this is much harder. So but it is that remembrance of, oh no, there's a reason that what happened to you there it's been affecting you. You don't want to go back to anything like that. So it's that quick turnaround of coming out of that. And I think for entrepreneurs, especially when they're coming in and building, that's the hardest part, is the stability, the every 2 weeks, that sense of it, and then the ability to continue to discipline, because all I wanted forever was to work from home, and I realized working from home set me up a bit differently. So I had to, now I structure things to ensure that I have focus and get things done and do things. But coming home, though it seemed great, wasn't necessarily the best thing for me until I had prepared fully for what that really looked like. Self-motivation wasn't something I was big at, because I had just been going and going for years. There was no need for self-motivation, right? So I think we come into that with that idea of, oh, we got to do this for ourselves, for money that may not come this week, or a client that you work so hard for and that may not happen this week. And those kinds of things, that rejection is really hard. So I do think we trade in one thing, as coming from employment into entrepreneurial, that has to be definitely adjusted in our heads. For me, it took longer than a year. I will admit that. And I'm still in those moments where it's like, oh, oh yeah, I'm not getting a paycheck every 2 weeks. It's that
Right. I immediately set a routine. I kept the same routine. Like, I woke up later, but I started work. I did the 9 to 5. And because that was something that felt safe. And I didn't do it right away. I did take some downtime. I did have that luxury. But from the get-go, I was like, oh, I'm just going to keep working 9 to 5. There were a few times I had to adjust that because of, just life or circumstances or a move or whatever. But for the most part, I still work 9 to 5. That's still, and now it's more about my health. In the morning, I feel much better. I can do more. My energy is higher. And in the afternoon is when I need to do things that aren't don't require as much energy. I don't always have that luxury, but I try to structure my time that way intentionally. And I can do that now. And that's one of the things that I have just recently come to grasp with is, oh, I don't have to meet on Mondays if I don't want to. I don't have to meet on Fridays if I don't want to. I don't have to meet the last of the friend of mine who also has her own business. We were talking one day and she's like, I don't even do meetings the last week of the month so that I can make sure I get everything done and set up for the next month. And I'm like, that is freaking genius. And I'm doing that. So I immediately adopted that, and I don't do meetings the last week of the month. Yeah. Because like we can do that. Now, there have been times where I've been like, somebody will say, I couldn't get on your calendar until such a time. Or I can say, I want to meet with you next week, but I don't have any availability on, through Calendly, but I can put you on my calendar kind of thing. And I will do that. The same thing with Mondays and Fridays, but
keep your days and then make that choice. Like if we allow,
but
that on there, but it's a choice. And I love that.
Yeah.
Mondays and Fridays are my thing. So I try really hard to keep Mondays and Fridays clear.
Those are our podcast days. We kind of, yeah.
No, I totally understand. I mean, that was one of the things that I started to recognize for myself, like I said, it's a journey, is that at the beginning I liberalized my calendar, and because I have my own podcast and, I would send out invitations and then people would schedule whenever they wanted. And then I started to, it's just a learning process. I'm like, no, this really isn't working for me. Maybe working for them, but it ain't working for me. And it's my podcast, so it better work for me. And, so then I started to change my calendar. I record my podcast if I have guests on Monday. If they cannot meet on a Monday, then I will open up a slot later on. I've started to block time to do certain things because otherwise I never had time. Like Tuesdays, I joined a BNI. Tuesdays, I do my networking. I try to do all networking events, networking meetings, things on a Tuesday. I do my coaching with my clients on a Tuesday evening, which I get a lot of energy from. So I just started to package the time blocks into things that are more manageable. I release 3 episodes of a podcast a week, and one is typically an interview. And so I've still got to find time in the week to do the other 2 episodes. And so like Mondays and Tuesdays are nobody can get on my calendar unless I put them on my calendar. And then Wednesdays and Thursdays and Fridays are, client and focus time. And but the problem is that, like I still work 6 days a week, but I don't work 8 hours a day. Like
and that's what works for you. And that's the beauty of it. And I work 1 Saturday a month because I want 1 Friday off a month, completely off. Yeah. And the Saturday allows me to give people the opportunity to do calls on Saturdays.
Yep. That's exactly why I work on a Saturday.
Sundays. Yeah, I work Sundays because I do Sabbath Friday to Saturday. So Saturdays usually for me are shut down unless it's something very specific or necessary. But yeah, and so like I'll work on Sundays. And it's like, you work Sundays? Nobody works Sundays. And I'm like, I don't work Saturdays. I work Sundays. So it's a quiet day. It's client work, behind the scenes, business stuff. Like I'm doing something that I would do through the week, but it's that same idea that we get to make that schedule. For me, Saturday's important to keep quiet and, low key kind of days. And so, yeah, it's great to have that ability to just be like, I don't have to today,
Yeah.
Not a requirement. Nobody's calling me in to do something, or we're not having a meltdown at work or something like that. Like everything's good. So it definitely is hopeful when that, when you have that ability to be like, finally go,
And I think everybody, like you said, is that everybody's journey, it is a journey, and everybody's journey is a little different. And I think that's kind of the moral of the story here so far is each of us have had entrepreneurial journeys, but they have been different. We've handled them differently. We've coped differently. We've exited corporate differently. we've had guests on that left corporate very suddenly. Don't recommend it, but one thing it does, it makes you very motivated, and and some people need that, and some people will crumble under it. So everybody is different, and it's okay to do it your way. I think if anybody comes away with anything from this conversation, let it be that. And Lizette, I wanted to give you some time to talk. I know before when we were talking before we went live, you mentioned that, as a caregiver, whether it's for someone with dementia or just a general caregiver, is that sorry, some messages were coming through and I lost my train of thought, but I wanted to give you an opportunity to talk about the KOLBE, and I want to give you an opportunity to talk about that specifically, that whether you are a caregiver for someone with dementia or general caregiver, there's still a toll, and there's still, some self-care that needs to happen and things like that. So first of all, tell us what the KOLBE is.
So I'm actually going to flip it around if you don't mind. I'm going to start with the caregiving journey first. And the reason I want to start with that first is because just like an entrepreneur, so this is fascinating. When I left the healthcare space, my background is an occupational therapist. So I'm trained as an occupational therapist to help people rehabilitate and all of that, and meet goals and get better and do the things that they want to be able to do. And part of that journey as an occupational therapist is to mostly focus on the patient, quite rightfully so, because that is the person whose insurance is paying for the skills, right? But in taking care of patients, there are always caregivers. There are people who are helping take care of that person, whether it be a car accident, a stroke, whatever, right? Some people come about it suddenly, something happens, the person's in the hospital, and all of a sudden we fall into a caregiving journey. That's typically how we start, is in an emergency situation. And then some people, because of the injury or whatever, they flip back out and they're not a caregiver anymore. Life goes on. But for some people, they fall into the hot water, they turn into a caregiver, and then they're on a caregiving journey for the rest of their life that they weren't expecting, that they never signed up for. The reality of the matter is the healthcare system does not focus on caregivers. They focus on the people who are being taken care of. But what I recognized when two things happened. I stepped out of working in healthcare that opened up my mind to start thinking about things differently. And then I became a family caregiver to my parents, who I should have known that I was a caregiver, because my mom had a massive stroke when I was 18. She was 42.
Oh, wow.
But because we had been through the crisis, and my dad was living with her, and I'd moved on, gotten married, had my own children, I really didn't recognize that from the point of 18 on, we were family caregivers to my mom, right? She is independent, mostly independent, and did really well, but she's now 76 and is aging with the effects of an old stroke. But what I started to notice, or what I recognized, is that just like an entrepreneurial journey, caregiving is 100% your mindset, is how you think about your caregiving journey. And it's also more than just the entrepreneurial journey or the caregiving journey. There's also afterwards, right? So everybody is focusing on the caregiving journey, taking care of that person, but nobody is focusing on what does my life look like after this journey, right? There's life after caregiving.
Yeah.
54 years old in September. And if I help take care of my parents until I'm 60 or 65 or whatever, I want to still be able to be healthy enough, and a grandmother or whatever the Lord gives me. So that kind of opened up my thinking related to caregiving. And then because I stepped out of the healthcare world and started listening to entrepreneurial podcasts and things like that, and because my background includes this whole big evidence-based stuff,
Yes. Mm-hmm.
I started to become aware of or become introduced to other types of assessments from the corporate world that I never had heard of before. And one of them is the KOLBE index. And so what I like about the KOLBE is because my background as an occupational therapist is in dementia caregiving, which is cognition, right?
Mm-hmm.
Thinking processes, how we think, our IQ, what we learn. And that is the realm that I live in related to dementia caregiving.
Mm.
We all know that we have the affective side, right? The feeling side. We can test that, in the corporate world. We have Myers-Briggs, we have all of these
Yes.
things like the Clifton strengths and stuff like that can test the affective side. Well, the KOLBE is the doing one. How you actually, if you are free to be yourself, how you will take action on doing something. And so in my journey, I heard of the KOLBE index on a podcast somewhere. Go look it up. I take it. And it was mind-blowing to me how accurate it was related to just who I am as a person, how I actually process and take action on information that I get. And what that did was, like, it totally explained a lot of things that had happened in my life and why certain things were harder for me than certain other things were for other people who had different strengths. And it was like a light switch, because the KOLBE looks at 4 different modes. The one is what they call fact finding. The one is called follow through. One is called quick start. And the last mode is what they call implementer. And based on it's not everybody's score is perfect for them. It's how you are unique to yourself. It's literally like your blueprint on how you think. Everybody has a certain IQ that's unique to them, right? Everybody has a certain personality. But what the KOLBE looks at is how you, if you were free to actually do things your own way, how you would do it. And so we were talking at the beginning, about scripting and stuff. With my KOLBE index, I initiate out of a quick start, which means the more structure I have, the worse I do. Like, just let me talk. I can talk all day, every day, and it doesn't stress me out. I tell people I'm a solution factory. Like, just point me in a direction, tell me something. I'll come up with ideas all day long. I don't even think about it. Right. And that's me. But then then I started doing it with my clients, some of my caregivers. And it's been fascinating to me to see how it's like, oh, this makes so much sense, because with this particular person, with this particular KOLBE index, I know why they're doing so well with my group coaching. It's because they initiate in fact finding, and when they're talking to me, they're getting all of the information that they need specific to their specific situation in dementia caregiving. And this person is initiating in quick start, and when she is communicating with her husband, who now has dementia, she's coming to him like she always did with all of the ideas, and his brain's shutting down, and he says no. I'm like, yeah. So it's opened up this world for me to be able to do things differently with the caregivers. So I've started to play with using the KOLBE for the caregivers to see how I can tailor their caregiving journey for them, specific to dementia caregiving.
Nice.
Wonderful.
And I just want to emphasize here, this is applicable to almost every woman on the planet.
Absolutely. Like, I legitimately, I would tell every single person to go take the KOLBE index. Like, I have no skin in the game. I'm not certified or anything, right? But for me, like, I was in boarding school, and when I got my KOLBE index score, my KOLBE index is 6482. So I'm in the middle in the fact finding and follow through. I initiate and quick start, and I don't need to use tools. I can see things in my head, right? That's pretty much a summary. But the reality of the matter is, with my particular KOLBE index score, being in a very, very structured environment is it is extremely, extremely difficult. And boarding school was extremely
Mhm.
hard for me, extremely. And I'm like, I look at it now and I'm like, oh,
Now
well,
you get it.
I totally get it. Like, I look at, the jobs I've had in my life. Oh, this job didn't work. Oh, this is why. Like, I had my two kids, my daughter and her husband, do it. And I looked at their KOLBE scores and I'm like, oh, I can tell where you guys are having conflict just by looking at it, right? Because they're vastly different in two modes. Like, my husband and I
Hmm.
only differ in one mode by more than 4 points, 4 things. But my daughter and her husband in two modes are 6 apart,
Oh.
which means how they've not killed one another, I'm not sure yet.
Yeah, lots of opportunity. That's what we call in the healthcare opportunities for improvement. There's an OFI for you.
I know, an
Uh,
opportunity for improvement.
yes. Um, and and I said women because majority of caregiving is happening by women. I'm not.
Absolutely.
I think that there are more men stepping up doing more of the caregiving.
It's about
Absolutely. Mhm.
66% to 75% are women. And about of
Yeah.
those, about 75% are adult daughters, the oldest daughter.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That's funny. In our house, that's how it was. And when I first met my husband, we were 8 years into a 10-year long battle with my mom's cancer. And it was, him seeing that, what happens and what goes on and how that is, the 2 o'clock in the morning emergency calls and all the stuff that goes on, and the amount of times we ended up in somewhere saying goodbyes and then not having that, and that back and forth feeling that would go along with it. And it was very eye-opening because you don't truly realize how effective that can be on your day-to-day life. I think
Mhm.
after my mom passed, I didn't answer my phone for almost a year. If anybody who knew me, knew my husband, if they needed to reach me that bad and it wasn't work
Right.
related, they knew where to find me. Like, for text messaging, answering calls, I
Mhm.
did for, I'm sure, over a year, but at least a year. My phone was probably never charged. Like, it was so tiring at that point that
Mhm.
that was at that moment where that relief came about, and I was able to just be like, okay, and start to get
Not
past
on
all the stuff,
duty.
and now what comes, and panicking at 2 in the morning if the phone rings, like, oh God, and that kind of thing. So
Well,
that's
you were in burnout,
Right.
mm,
And
right?
that's exactly why I started my business, is like, that is 100% the focus of my business, is not the person living with dementia. I teach the caregivers the skills they need to have in order to take care of the person, but I'm focusing on preventing people from burning out. That is the sole purpose of what I do, because there's data out there that, we can go into that all day every day related to the data. There are
Yeah.
benchmarks, there's data that tells us exactly when somebody is getting ready to burn out, but nobody is actually doing the right stuff to try to prevent it before it happens.
Hmm.
And I just think there's so much more. Like I said before we got on, my brain sees connections between stuff. And so, like the KOLBE index, I see an application of that related to a caregiving journey. There are caregiver burnout inventories that tell us exactly where a person's burnout score is, so that we can start to look at where the buckets of stress are, because not everybody's stress is the same, and then we can customize and tailor and put things in place exactly for that, instead of just saying, I'm stressed.
Mm-hmm.
I'm stressed
Yeah.
caregiving. Well, yeah, I'm stressed by living.
And Lizette, you have a couple of really cool, offers, free offers for our audience. Laura, do you want to share a little bit about those? And
Absolutely. So there is a free caregiver burnout quiz that you can take, and we will have the link for that in the show notes. And it finds out how stressed you are, and if you're caregivers, and find out how stressed you are and what that may look like for you. There's also an ebook about dementia. And you would just need to email Lizette to get a copy of the ebook. And again, we will put all the information in for all of that. But that, the ebook about dementia and then the quiz, definitely if you're dealing in any kind of caregiving role, this truly be helpful for you. So we would love to she's offering that up, which is a wonderful gift for everyone. So
yeah. And one of the things, thank you, Laura. Thank you, Lizette, for that wonderful,
You're very welcome,
generous offer. One of the things we like to do on the podcast, and if you've listened to us, you already know this part, so feel free to fast forward. But we like to have the current guest introduce next week's guest as a demonstration of collaboration versus competition. So, Lizette, take it away.
Thank you so much. So I'm going to not give the next guest's last name because I'm going to butcher it just like my name gets butchered. So we're not going to do that. Miss Tatiana can tell people her last name next week. She is a trauma and somatic therapist, a holistic coach and speaker. She is a first-generation Latina who is on a mission to help more women regulate and rewire their nervous systems through holistic living and somatic practices. And you need to loop her in with me because I think we would have a good conversation.
Absolutely.
And therapist of 8 years, Tatiana is passionate about educating others on the essential role that the nervous system plays in everything that we do. And that is really, really great because nervous system regulation as a caregiver is vital.
Again, I'm telling you, the universe just lines up these guests so perfectly. We don't schedule people, they self-schedule. And I just love the way it always works out. So stay tuned. Next week's guest is a perfect complement to this week's guest. And thank you again, Lizette, for being with us today and spending this time with us and sharing your story and all of your wisdom and resources. And the announcement this week is sponsorships. We are offering sponsorships now. So check out our website, our social, all the things. If you're interested in that, or just email us or hit us up anywhere you can find us. And we will see you guys next week at the same time, Mondays at 12 Eastern. Thanks, everybody.
Bye,
Talk to you then.